Have you ever wondered why you were born at this particular moment? Looking around us, with all its turbulence, uncertainty, and difficulties, one naturally wonders why we are here and why now. Imagine, however, if your birth were to happen exactly at this moment, wouldn't it be by chance? What would happen if, amidst all the turbulence and uncertainty, you were here on this planet at this moment for a mission? One becomes very deliberately calm upon realizing that our existence has a meaning, that we are not random, and that every breath we take has a purpose. In reality, God has a plan for you if you were born in these days. That plan is woven into the very fabric of His greater creation. Considering the size of the planet and the scope of its issues makes one feel small. You might find yourself wondering, what impact can I possibly make in such a large, complex society? But think about this. God, the creator of the world, built the earth with His hands and spoke the stars into life, thereby generating you with purpose. He accomplishes nothing but for aimlessness. Everything He produces has a purpose. That includes you. God picked you personally, hence you are here, at this time and in this space. His divine design included your birth circumstances, the family you were born into, and the period of time you live in historically. One should keep in mind that God always schedules exactly, though nothing could be farther from the truth. Sometimes we see the world around us and believe it to be all random or that things are spinning out of control. God is sovereign. Nothing gets beyond His awareness. From the biggest historical events to the smallest moments in your life, everything is under His direction. Therefore, there is a cause if you were born in these days. God has a mission for you that relates to this particular instant in time. He has put you here because only you are qualified to perform. Only you can make a difference here. God has always lifted up people at pivotal times to accomplish His will throughout history. Consider some of the most important Bible personalities, people like Moses, Esther, and Joseph. Perfect folks were not these ones. Many of them battled great difficulty. They were not born into simple lives. Moses was born during a period when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt. From the time Pharaoh ordered all Hebrew infant boys to be slaughtered, his own life was under danger. Still, God had Moses' life scheduled even with all the risk involved. Raised in Pharaoh's own home, God subsequently turned him into leader for the Israelites from slavery into freedom. Esther, too, was born at a pivotal junctural event in history. She was selected to be Persian queen as a young Jewish lady. Her position, meanwhile, was not just to lead a lavish life at the palace. God has sent her there for a purpose. Esther was the one who bravely stood before the king and begged for her people's life as a scheme to wipe them out developed. Her uncle, Mordecai, gently reminded her that maybe she had arrived in her position for such a time as this. This is a sobering reminder that we are often in trying circumstances not by accident, but rather by divine will. This holds also true for you. Though you may not know why you are here in this time or why you are confronting the difficulties you are having, you can be sure God does. He observes the whole image. He has a larger goal for your life than anything you could ever dream of and understands precisely why you were created at this moment. Whether they are happy or challenging, the situation you are now traversing is part of your getting ready for the part God has for you in His will. Looking at the world now makes one easily overwhelmed. There is much suffering, discord, and ambiguity. We live surrounded by wars, poverty, injustice, and misery. It might be difficult to know where we fit within all of this. The truth is, however, God never wastes anything, especially the life He generates. Each individual has a role to perform in His tale, including you. Though God specializes in employing the little and the apparently inconsequential to achieve great things, you could believe that you are too small or too insignificant to have an impact on the big picture. Think on the narrative of David. When the prophet Samuel was sent to anoint the future king of Israel, he chose none of Jesse's sons that were strongest or most outstanding. Rather, Jesus selected David, the younger man caring to the sheep. Though David was not the clear option in human perspective, God saw something in him that others did not. And it was David who would go on to conquer the behemoth everyone others dreaded and finally rank among Israel's best rulers. God sees nothing the way humans do. He does not define excellence according to worldly criteria. He sees the heart instead. He searches for individuals ready to follow His call, to have faith, and to trust Him. God's design for your life may not be obvious right now. Although you may not know precisely what He is asking you to accomplish, that is not bad. Walking with God is teaching one to trust Him, even if the road forward is unknown. He guides us methodically rather than revealing His whole purpose to us all at once. Every day when we rely on Him with the little things, He leads us toward the mission He has set for us. It reminds me of a tapestry being spun together. From our restricted viewpoint, we could only notice the individual threads, the chaos of life's challenges and victories. God, however, sees the whole picture and understands just how each thread interacts to produce something exquisite. The book of Proverbs has a chapter titled, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." This suggests that while we could create our own plans, it is ultimately God who guides our pathways. Though we cannot see it personally, He knows the best path for us. Therefore, it is rather crucial to keep near to Him, ask His direction via prayer, and believe that He is guiding us on the correct path even if the road looks unknown. Our perspective of the world changes when we start to realize that God has a goal for our life, and that He has put us at this moment and in these conditions for that reason. We know we are part of something greater, hence we are free from living in ambiguity or anxiety. We know that God is working in and through us to fulfill His will. Our lives have significance. Knowledge that God is in charge and that His intentions for us are good gives us hope even in trying circumstances. Thus, keep in mind that God has a purpose for you should you ever feel lost or question why you are here. You were born in these times for a certain purpose. Your existence has direction, and that direction relates to the particular historical period you live in. God is with you every step of the way, that He is directing you, that He has prepared you for the trials you encounter. Deeper exploration of what it means to live out this purpose is vital as we keep considering the fact that God has a plan for your life, and that your birth in these days is not an accident. Realizing your goal marks just the start. Accepting that purpose and walking in it comes next, even if the road is not always obvious or simple. Trusting God's plan requires learning to look beyond our present situation and knowing that, no matter what, He is working things together for good. The fact that we never know where we are headed in life is among its most difficult features. Though there will always be unanticipated curves along the road, we may plan and establish objectives. Sometimes the road ahead seems dubious or even terrifying. However, at such times we may find solace in the knowledge that God knows the path. He is directing us even if we do not know the direction He is pointing us in. He is seeing what we cannot. Knowing that God's timing is exact reveals a lovely reality. God's intentions follow His divine time frame, not ours, even if we would want things to happen on our own schedule. When we feel as if events aren't moving quickly enough, or when we're waiting for responses that seem to take eternity to arrive, this may be difficult to accept. Still, the waiting is not squandered. God prepares us for what is coming by means of these seasons of waiting. He teaches us patience, builds our faith, and helps us to define our character. One might easily become annoyed or demoralized in these waiting times. We can even wonder if God knows of us at all. None, however, could be farther from the truth. God never forgets His children. In our lives, He is constantly at work, even if we cannot see Him. Remind ourselves during these moments that God's viewpoint is much more expansive than our own. God is seeing the whole picture even if we may be preoccupied with what is occurring right now. He is utilizing this opportunity to equip us for what is ahead because He knows exactly what it is. Consider the biography of Joseph found in the Bible. As a young guy, Joseph was visionarily brilliant. He fantasized about one day ascending to a position of authority and leadership. But Joseph had to travel a protracted and challenging path before his desire could come true. His siblings deceived him. He was sold into slavery. He was wrongly convicted. He was sent into jail. Joseph must have felt for years that his life was headed nowhere. The dream he was handed looked unreachable. But God was at work all through Joseph's tribulations. God was getting Joseph ready for the part he would ultimately play in rescuing his people, even if he cannot see it. Every difficulty Joseph had was part of God's design to help him grow personally, deepen his faith, and place him precisely where he needed to be just at the right moment. Joseph was ready when the time arrived, and he ascended to a position of enormous impact just as God had showed him. Joseph's narrative reminds us that seasons of preparation are frequently part of God's designs. Difficult situations sometimes allow us to develop into the persons God has called us to be. In the thick of such struggles, trusting God is not always simple. Nevertheless, knowing that He is in charge helps us to find calm. Every difficulty we encounter presents chances for personal development. Every adversity moves one step toward the fulfillment of God's will for our life. Learning to totally trust God is one of the secrets of following His will. Most of us do not grow organically in this trust. We want to be in charge. We like knowing what is ahead. Walking with God, however, requires letting go of that control and letting God guide us even when we have no idea where we are headed. It implies saying, "God, I trust you even if I do not comprehend what is occurring right now. You are excellent, and I have positive expectations about your intentions for me." This kind of confidence calls for faith. It calls for faith that God will perform what He has promised, and that He is who He claims He is. There are several instances of individuals who had to believe God amid trying conditions seen throughout the Bible. For instance, Abraham was instructed to leave everything he knew and go for a place God would reveal him. Though he had no idea where he was headed, he believed God enough to follow. In the same manner, we are invited to trust God with the unknowns of our life. Not all the solutions are required of us. We are not looking at the complete picture here. We only have to believe that God does. Remember that God is with you every step of the journey, even while you search for His reason for your life. He has vowed never to abandon or leave you. Hold on to God's promises even if the path ahead seems challenging and the future seems unknown. He will bring you over and is devoted. Romans 8 verse 28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Reminds us powerfully that God is doing everything for our benefit regardless of what goes on in our life. His broader intention to bring forth something good in us includes even the seeming difficult or puzzling elements. Life will have moments when it seems as if everything is falling apart. There will be heartbreak, grief, and hurtful times. God is still in charge even at such times, however. He still works. He is still guiding you toward the use He intends for your life. And frequently, we develop most during those challenging moments. Our faith develops in the challenges we face. Our character is polished amid the challenges. Thus, if the road ahead looks uncertain, do not become demoralized. If you are in a season of waiting, don't lose heart. Though you cannot see anything, believe God is working behind the scenes and His time is perfect. Know that you are a part of His great plan. He has selected this moment and this location for you to serve a special need. God has larger plans for you than anything you could ever conceive. They surpass your worries, your uncertainties, or your hardships. He will provide you everything you need to serve His plan for your life. He has called you for this time. Thus, keep moving in faith, keep believing in His kindness, and know He is with you, guiding you at every turn. Examining how we could actively carry out God's plan for our life is crucial as we travel this road of knowledge. A fantastic basis is knowledge that God has a plan for us and trusting Him. However, how can we really use this in our daily life? How do we bring ourselves into line with the goal God has assigned for us? These are crucial considerations, as one cannot rely only on believing that God has a will. We are invited to join that plan with faith, action, and endurance. Learning to listen for God's voice is one of the first stages in living out His plan. Through His Word, prayer, the knowledge of others, and sometimes even the events we come across, God communicates to us in many different ways. To hear His voice, however, we must deliberately make room for it. Our habits, obligations, and the cacophony of the world around us often entwine us in the activity of life. We become so sidetracked that we overlook the soft prodding or words from God meant to steer us. We are most likely to hear God in the quiet times when we deliberately seek Him. This is why it is so crucial to cultivate a prayer and reading of the Scripture practice. By means of prayer, we open our hearts to God, thus enabling Him to speak to us, so consoling us and so guiding us. Reading the Bible helps us to understand His character, promises, and daily guidelines. Our life gets clearer in this case we spend more time with God. His voice becomes spending time with a friend or loved one brings us closer to them. Similarly, by means of our connection with God, we approach him. Obedience follows from our diligent search for God's voice. Whether God reveals anything to us, a direction, a calling, or a little prompting, we must be ready to react with compliance. God requires of us sometimes seems tough or even impossible tasks. He could invite us to challenge ourselves we feel unprepared for, to trust him in ways we never have done, or to go beyond our comfort zones. This is where faith is useful, however. Respect of God is shown by obedience. It reveals that, despite our ignorance of all the specifics, we think he understands what is best for us. Consider the narrative of Noah. Though there was no indication of rain, God urged Noah to construct a massive ark in readiness for a deluge, something that would have appeared absolutely ludicrous to everyone around him. Noah might have easily questioned, challenged, or disobeyed God's instructions, but he paid attention instead. Noah's obedience preserved not just his life, but also the lives of his family and many of the earth's species as he knew God was guiding him. This narrative reminds us that following God is not just about ourselves, but also about the knock-on effects our actions could have on the surroundings. Learning to welcome the process is also rather important for living out God's will. Many times, when we consider purpose, we concentrate on the ultimate result, the whole picture, the last stop. But God has more in mind for us than just where we land. It also concerns our development along the road. Lessons, development, and change abound on the road itself. Whether it seems like progress or not, every action we do helps us to become the God called upon us to be. We sometimes get irritated. We want to get to the good stuff, the realization of our purpose, the fulfillment of our aspirations, the accomplishment of our goals, skipping over the challenging bits. Actually, however, the most crucial are usually the challenging aspects. It's in the waiting, in the hardships, in the obstacles we are polished. Our character grows out of the challenges we encounter, just as gold is refined in the fire. God is rather interested in who we are becoming, not just in what we achieve. This is the reason one must really rely on God's timetable. Though his timing is always appropriate, even when it does not coincide with our own expectations, his plans for us are flawless. Should we hurry on, we could overlook the insightful teachings he intends to impart to us along the road. Should we fall behind, we might pass up chances he has set out for us. Believing God's timetable involves learning to go ahead when he says the time is appropriate and to wait when needed. It's a delicate balance, and it calls on us to keep in touch to him via prayer and introspection. Apart from depending on God's timetable, we also have to accept the reality that his will for our life is generally expressed in phases. He guides us one step at a time most of the time. Sometimes he offers us a peek of the larger picture. For those of us who prefer to schedule everything, this might be annoying. Yet, it's really a wonderful aspect of the road. Every stride of trust we make advances us toward the goal he wants for us. Every act of compliance enhances our connection with him and helps us to trust him. Living out God's will also helps us to realize that the abilities and talents he has bestowed upon us are supposed to be shared with the world, not only for our advantage. Everybody is individually made with skills, interests, and abilities destined to benefit others. Using the talents God has bestowed upon us not only serves our need, but also advances the larger good. Speaking about this in 1 Corinthians 12, the Apostle Paul compares the body of Christ to a human body, with each component serving a unique purpose. Every one of us is required in God's kingdom, just as the eye cannot tell the hand, "I don't need you." Each of us has a role to do. When we cooperate, we mirror the richness of God's creation. Remember also that God's intention for our life is about who we are, not just about what we do. Our calls to live reflect God's love, kindness, and truth to the world around us. This makes our character important. Fulfilling God's will includes our treatment of people, our response to difficulties, and how we live out our faith in daily life. We are asked to be light in a world that seems often to be dark. We are asked to be salt, imparting taste and maintaining what is good in a world that sometimes seems bland or rotting. Living out God's purpose is ultimately about handing our life to him, trusting him to know what is best for us, and letting him lead us every step of the way. It's about deciding to live deliberately, knowing that every minute presents chances for development, service, and meditation on God's grandeur. It's about realizing that even if the road may not always be clear-cut, Still, it is always worth it as it brings us closer to the one who made us for a greater good than we could ever dream. Let us pause as we near the end of our trip to consider what we have so far discovered. We have discussed how your life is not an accident and how God has a purpose for you, particularly in these days. You were meant for something and your deliberate existence on this planet. We have also covered the need of depending on God's timetable, following His call, and even if the road is unknown, carrying out your purpose one step at a time. Let us now explore the last piece of this jigsaw. How, even on a difficult path, we may live out our mission with bravery, tenacity, and unbroken faith. Having the bravery to stay on even under difficult circumstances is one of the most crucial elements of serving God. When everything is going according to God's will, it is simple to follow. However, what happens when we come across challenges? When life becomes difficult, when doors appear to shut, or when we feel as if we have lost our path? These are the times that test our faith and our will to serve God. Remember, however, that just because the route is challenging does not indicate you are headed in the wrong direction. Actually, some of the best tales of faith originate from tenacious struggle through adversity. Think on Paul's narrative in the New Testament. Paul's task of evangelizing the gospel presented much difficulty. Over his life, he was shipwrecked, imprisoned, abused, and faced several threats. Paul never gave up, however. Knowing God had a purpose for him, he was resolved to see it through whatever challenges arose. Paul said in one of his letters, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." 2 Timothy 4 verse 7. Paul's life shows us that while it's not always simple, following God's will is always well worth it. Fulfilling your goal mostly depends on perseverance. When problems develop, it might be easy to give up or choose the simpler road. But it is at these times that God is most frequently working in us. Adversity helps Him to deepen our faith, polish our character, and impart to us insightful teachings ready for the future. Our faith is frequently polished by hardships, just as gold is polished in fire. Our challenges are supposed to mold us into the individuals God created, not to destroy us. Thus, keep your cool when you run into challenges. You know God is still with you, guiding you and making use of even the worst events for benefit. Learning to walk by faith and not by sight is another crucial component of carrying out God's will. Life will have periods when the road forward looks unclear and we may not always know where God is guiding us. However, faith is believing God even in cases when the complete picture is not visible. It implies accepting that, despite our lack of all the solutions, God's will is good. This sort of faith calls for us to trust totally in God and to let up of our desire for control. Walking by faith also implies being ready to venture. God urges us sometimes to go into the future and to boldly act in faith even though we have no idea what the result will be. Consider Peter, who headed toward Jesus across a lake. Though the seas were high and the wind was severe, he got out of the boat and headed for his Savior, in a moment of amazing trust. Indeed, Peter started to sink as he turned away from Jesus, but that moment still serves as a potent illustration of what may happen when we are ready to boldly act and trust. Jesus grabbed Peter out of his sinking motion, and He will do the same for you when you act in trust toward His instructions. Walking in faith will teach you the value of community as well. God never meant for us to serve just our own needs. He positions individuals in our life to support us, pray for us, walk with us, and enable our personal development. According to the Bible, iron sharpens iron, hence we are supposed to develop together in community. When life becomes rough, having a loving community of believers may make all the difference. Surrounded by individuals also looking for God's plan for their life, you will discover insight, strength, and inspiration. A necessary component of following out God's will, community also allows us the chance to help others. Jesus Himself said He came to serve, not to be served. Following His example requires us to be ready to help others around us. God has bestowed upon every one of us certain abilities and capabilities. He asks us to use them not only for our personal advantage, but also for the advantage of others. We are asked to be the hands and feet of Jesus in the world, whether that means by deeds of kindness, words of encouragement, or skillful assistance of someone in need. Apart from helping others, We have to keep in mind that living in a manner that reflects God's love and kindness to the world helps us to achieve His mission. People are observing our daily existence. They observe our responses to adversity, our treatment of others, and our living out of our beliefs. Every day we have a chance to be a mirror of God's love to others around us, a lighthouse amid the gloom. This does not imply we have to be flawless, because none of us are. It does, however, imply that we strive to live in a manner that respects God and draws others to Him. Remember that you do not have to walk in your own power while you keep on your mission. God's mercy is enough for you. His might is perfected in your frailty. See God when you are fatigued, stressed, feeling as if you lack the will to carry on. He pledges to provide us strength right as needed. God is your source of strength. He will walk and not be weak. Those who trust in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not be tired. Ultimately, remember this: God's design for your life is more than you could ever conceive. He has called you at this point in time for a specific reason, and He has given you everything you need to carry out His intended use. See His timing, walk in trust, and keep on through difficult times. You were born in these days because God has a plan for you, and it is full of hope, goal, and future.